The morning air in Rome felt ancient, heavy with history, as Daniel stood near the Colosseum, listening to the soft echoes of footsteps on the stone streets. He had come to Italy to study history and language, but deep inside, he was searching for something more than books and museums. Rome was not just a city to him, it felt like a living story, a place where the past and present walked side by side. Every building, every street, every broken column seemed to whisper stories of emperors, wars, power, and dreams that once ruled the world. Daniel spent his days walking through old markets, sitting in quiet cafes, and watching people talk with their hands, laugh loudly, and live slowly. He noticed how life in Rome moved at a different speed. People were not in a hurry. They took time to talk, to eat, to enjoy the moment. Old men played chess in small squares. Children ran between fountains. Tourists took photos, but locals simply lived. Rome felt calm, deep, and timeless. One evening, Daniel sat near the Tiber River and thought about his home in Washington. Washington was a modern city, full of glass buildings, wide roads, and fast-moving people. Life there was about schedules, meetings, deadlines, and decisions. People talked about power, politics, money, and success. Everything felt organized, controlled, and planned. In Washington, people measured time by clocks. In Rome, people measured time by life. The idea of, between Rome and Washington, began to grow in Daniel's mind. It was not just about two cities. It was about two ways of living, two ways of thinking, and two kinds of power. Rome represented history, tradition, culture, and the wisdom of the past. Washington represented modern power, technology, control, and the future. One was built on stones and stories. The other was built on systems and structures. As Daniel thought more, he realized that both cities were powerful in different ways. Rome once ruled the world with armies, roads, and laws. Its influence spread across continents. Even today, Roman ideas live in modern laws, languages, and governments. Washington, on the other hand, ruled through politics, money, and global influence. Decisions made in Washington affected millions of lives across the world. Different methods, same impact. Daniel remembered walking near the Capitol building in Washington, watching people in suits rush into big offices. He remembered the serious faces, the security guards, the controlled entrances. Everything felt official and distant. Power there felt cold and formal. In Rome, power felt old and quiet, hidden in ruins, statues, and churches. It was not loud, but it was deep. During his stay in Rome, Daniel met an old professor named Marco. Marco spoke slowly and carefully, choosing his words with wisdom. One day, they sat together in a small cafe, and Daniel shared his thoughts about Rome and Washington. Marco smiled and said that every great city reflects the soul of its people. He said Rome teaches patience, memory, and reflection. Washington teaches ambition, speed, and control. Neither is better, but both are incomplete alone. These words stayed in Daniel's heart. He realized that the world needs both. It needs the calm wisdom of Rome and the active energy of Washington. It needs history and future, tradition and progress, emotion and logic. Life is not about choosing one side. It is about balance. As days passed, Daniel began to change. He started waking up early to watch the sunrise over old buildings. He wrote letters instead of short messages. He listened more and spoke less. Rome taught him to slow down. But he also knew that Washington had taught him discipline, responsibility, and purpose. He was learning to carry both worlds inside him. One night, while standing on a quiet Roman bridge, Daniel looked at the river and imagined it flowing across oceans, across lands, across time, connecting Rome and Washington in an invisible way. He understood that cities may be far apart, but ideas travel faster than distance. Culture travels through people. History travels through memory. Power travels through decisions. Between Rome and Washington was no longer just a phrase. It became a symbol of inner conflict and inner balance. It meant living between tradition and modern life, between emotion and logic, between past and future. It meant being human in a world that moves too fast and remembers too little. When Daniel finally returned to Washington, he felt different. The city looked the same, but his eyes were new. He walked slower. He listened deeper. He respected time differently. He did not reject Washington, and he did not forget Rome. He carried both inside him. Rome became his soul. Washington became his structure. And in that space between Rome and Washington, Daniel found himself. The flight from Washington to Rome was long, quiet, and full of thoughts. As the plane crossed the ocean, Sarah looked out of the small window and wondered how two cities so far apart could both shape the world in such powerful ways. She had grown up near Washington, surrounded by discussions of politics, policy, and global responsibility. Her parents often talked about laws, elections, and international decisions at the dinner table. For her, power was something serious, structured, and heavy. Now, she was traveling to Rome, a city she had only seen in books and films, to study culture and language. When Sarah arrived in Rome, she felt an immediate difference. The air was warmer, the streets were narrower, and the buildings looked like they had survived centuries of human emotion. Rome did not try to impress her with height or speed. Instead, it invited her to slow down and look closely. Broken walls stood beside busy streets. Ancient churches shared space with modern shops. Life continued gently around history, not above it. Sarah spent her mornings walking through old neighborhoods, listening to Italian conversations, and watching daily life unfold. She noticed how people greeted each other warmly, how they stopped to talk, even when they were busy. In Washington, people often walked while checking phones, thinking about the next task. In Rome, people walked to live, not to arrive. One afternoon, Sarah visited the Roman Forum. She stood among the ruins and imagined speeches, debates, and decisions that once changed the world. Leaders had stood on those stones and spoken about justice, war, and law. Centuries later, similar conversations were happening in Washington, inside modern buildings with microphones and cameras. The places looked different, but the human desire for influence and control felt the same. As days passed, Sarah began to see Rome not as a city of the past, but as a teacher. Rome taught her about continuity. It showed her that power does not disappear, it changes form. Empires fall, but ideas remain. Laws, language, and systems created in ancient times still shaped modern governments. Washington was not separate from Rome. In many ways, it was a continuation. Sarah often compared the political culture of Washington with the cultural life of Rome. Washington focused on decisions, strategies, and results. Rome focused on meaning, tradition, and identity. In Washington, success was measured by influence and progress. In Rome, success was measured by memory and survival. One chased the future, the other protected the past. During a language exchange meeting, Sarah met Luca, a young Roman journalist. They talked about politics, culture, and identity. Luca said that Americans often looked forward, while Europeans often looked back. Sarah laughed and said that both ways could be dangerous if taken too far. Looking only forward could make people forget their roots. Looking only backward could stop growth. Their conversations continued over many evenings, sitting in small cafes, sharing stories. Through Luca, Sarah learned that Rome was not frozen in time. It was alive, full of debates, problems, and modern challenges. The difference was that Rome carried its history openly, while Washington carried its power visibly. As her stay came closer to an end, Sarah felt a quiet change inside herself. She no longer saw power as something only held by governments or leaders. She began to see power in culture, language, and shared values. Rome showed her that influence could be soft, slow, and deep. Washington showed her that influence could be fast, direct, and global. Both shaped the world, but in different rhythms. On her last evening in Rome, Sarah walked alone through a quiet street lit by yellow lamps. She thought about returning to Washington, to meetings, deadlines, and serious discussions. But she knew she would return with something new. She would bring patience into speed, memory into ambition, and humanity into systems. When Sarah landed back in Washington, the city welcomed her with its familiar order. The wide streets, tall buildings, and structured life felt different now. She saw them through the lens of Rome. She understood that true leadership required more than power. It required understanding, history, and respect for human experience. Between Rome and Washington, Sarah discovered a deeper truth. The world is shaped not only by decisions made in powerful offices, but also by stories told in quiet streets. Real influence lives in the balance between action and reflection. And in that balance, she found her place in a changing world.